Today, we're looking at Birmingham Pen Company's Point Park Fountain Turquoise. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Birmingham Pen Company's Point Park Fountain, tried to do it. Birmingham Pen Company's Point Park Fountain Turquoise, I'm leaving that in, is a turquoise ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a nib assigned Singularity with a fine nib to take my notes for this video. Before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water. And what strikes me at first, the very first thing, is it's behaving like a bunch of diatramentus inks that I've tried. Now, I'm not going to try and figure out who makes their inks because I really don't care. But we see this gray across the bottom, and there's a gray line that got very in immediately. The light gray pushed up, and then we see this very light blue leaning turquoise color at the top. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And that line across the bottom is very dark, very there. It makes me feel like there's about to become some permanence with this ink. The gray still pushes up, but not as far. We see a separation from the gray to that light blue. We start to see some of the white of the filter paper. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on a page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. Now, I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it did fairly well. The extra fine is still an extra fine. We start to see the slightest bit of blooming on the capital H, but not making it blurry at all. I might feel okay using this in a note-taking situation if I was the kind of person that highlighted. Water reactivated and moved the blue away, but left all of that dark gray in place on the paper. It didn't budge. Pen Flush, while it removed all of the blue or turquoise ink, the gray is still very much there. Now, to be fair, that is only 30 seconds of it just sitting there. But we really don't see the white of the paper starting to come through. 3 days, this was really getting in there. I'm not sure that Pen Flush is going to be enough. So you might have to use the 1/3 bleach solution. It completely removed it from the page. It did leave a little bit of the yellow staining, which we also see quite a bit with some of the diatramentus inks, but it is very common on the paper. If you use the 1/3 bleach solution that completely removed it from the paper, you want to put it into your pen and immediately get it out and then rinse it out. Don't rust those metal parts. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Birmingham Pen Company's Point Park Fountain Turquoise has a viscosity of 3.31, making this a super dry ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoy River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Birmingham Pen Company's Point Park Fountain Turquoise has an average dry time of 14 seconds, so despite being so dry, it's got a normal dry time. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. I really do not like these samples. They are messy to deal with. At first, I really applauded them for trying something new. If you try something new and it's really not working, this is so inconvenient to use and it's so messy to use. I wish they would abandon that sample. I can't buy any more samples from them because I can't deal with that. And I just don't feel like having to change the sample container. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. That spot that we see come through, that's transfer from a page underneath. My OCD's kicking in. I need my papers straight. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has a couple spots of shading, like the M in Birmingham. The P in point is lighter than the rest of the word. There's spots, little bits. Not great, but there is some spots. The extra fine is a noticeably darker tone than the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has more spots of shading. The shading looks quite a bit better here than it did with the 1.1. That downstroke of the Q is darker than the rest of the Q. K is a very dark letter. B in brown, it's dark, it works its way light here. The is a noticeably darker word than the word brown. Over starts light and works dark, so it's very nice shading here. 7 seconds to dry. The medium is a noticeably darker tone. The darkest tone on the page. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. And we only have a couple spots of shading where it comes through a little lighter than the other spots. Like the T in the is a bit darker than the rest of the word the. The F in fox is a little lighter than the rest of the word fox. And the O in over is a little lighter than the rest of over. Other than that, we're really not seeing much shading here, and it took 12 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine showed us some nice color variation, and we got some nice color variation up here. The medium shows us almost none, and we got almost none. And the smear test, you could likely recover if you smeared while you were writing. Tomoe River. Wow, that stereo. I don't know if you guys can hear that. That stereo going by is loud. Tomoe River has no bleeding, it has ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. This turquoise almost looks like a powder blue here. So the cream color of the paper has affected the tone of the ink to where it looks like kind of a blue there. But when we go to the extra fine, the turquoise comes back, it gets slightly darker. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. 13 seconds to dry, but Tomoe River is not really known for letting shade come through. The medium is a much darker tone. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 28 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it, and we didn't get it in a smear test. You might actually be able to recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Rhodia. Rhodia has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has a couple spots of shading, like the K in Park is a little bit darker than the rest of Park. The H in Birmingham is a little bit darker than the rest of the Birmingham. But that's it. But there is a couple spots where a little darker shade comes through. The extra fine is a little bit darker tone than the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it has more spots of shading. Like quick starts dark, becomes a medium tone and gets dark again. Brown starts dark and works its way lighter. Fox starts lighter and works its way darker. It's very nice in the extra fine. It took 7 seconds to dry. The medium became a much darker tone with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shading whatsoever. 15 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows us some color variation, and we did get some, and the medium shows us none, and we got none. Smear test you could definitely recover if you smeared while you were writing. Levenger paper. Levenger paper has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade at all. The extra fine is a darker tone. It's about 2 shades darker. If you were to look at tonal values where you go from white to black and you're shading your grays through, it's about 2 tones darker. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shading here. 6 seconds to dry. The medium is a much darker tone. It's a big jump darker. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 11 seconds to dry. Now the extra fine scrubby shows us some color variation, but we got none in the actual writing. The medium shows us none, and we didn't get any. In the smear test, you could definitely recover if you smeared while you were writing. Black and red notebook, which has done very well with every ink so far. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade.
The extra fine is a darker tone. It's at, about 2 shades darker with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, spots of shading like the H in the is darker, the K in quick is darker, the B in brown is darker, the P in jumps is darker. So we do get some nice darker letters, which is very nice to look at. 6 seconds to dry. The medium is a noticeably darker tone, quite a bit darker. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows us some color variation, and we did get some color variation. The medium shows us none, and we got none, and a smear test you could definitely recover if you smeared while you were writing. So this is Strathmore calligraphy paper. It's a very nice laid paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, it comes through very light here with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shading at all. The extra fine is just a tad darker, just barely darker. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has a couple spots of being darker, like the K in quick, the B in brown. The word the word the is much darker than all the words around it. G in dog is darker, so it's got spots of shading. 5 seconds to dry. Medium becomes an incredibly dark tone with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows us some color variation, and we definitely saw some up here. The medium shows us none, and we got none. And the smear test you could definitely recover if you smeared while you were writing. And that is all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Birmingham Pen Company's Point Park Fountain Turquoise, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now this is a muted turquoise, which made me want something nice and bright, like a bright red. I went with Private Reserve's Dakota Red. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Birmingham Pen Company's Point Park Fountain Turquoise? I think this needs to be in a dry nib. In order to bring out some of the personality that this ink has, it needs to be in a dry nib so that you can get a little bit of that shading. Preferably a broader nib, because the Singularity being a fine nib made it a little bit harder to read. It's a very fine line with not a lot of ink down. Otherwise, it's just a turquoise. Using a broader, wetter pen isn't bringing out any more of it. Thanks for watching.